but very pleased to welcome my first guest to Luck on Sunday today. I described him as the big spending owner with big opinions and a big story. It's been a little while now that we've been trying to get him onto the Luck on Sunday studio, but the good news is we can do it in the wake of one of his highest profile triumphs, Ashtown Lad winning the Beecher Chase last weekend. He is, of course, Darren Yates. Darren, good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me. Good
to see you, and thanks for coming in. Last weekend.
Yep.
Where does that rank in your long and storied time as a racehorse owner?
I would say it's tough when you've had obviously the Frankie bet, but I would say it's probably my best day in racing. Having all my family there, trying to keep a few people quiet that only seem to have negative things to say about me buying horses, but it was just a really great day. A really great day.
I will obviously come on to that because I know you're itching to talk about it, but I want really to go right back to day one and where all this began, because a lot of people will say you had a bet on the Frankie Dettori accumulator in 1996, and that's how you became a punter. That's not quite as simple as that, is it?
No, I think at the time the papers liked to make the story that it was my last 60 quid in the world. Clearly it wasn't. We were reasonably comfortable at that time, Emily and I. I was building my first house, and obviously I had a bet on the Saturday. The rest is history. Won 550 grand. Of course, it helped massively, and it was pretty life changing. But I was still a punter at that time. Before that,
and you were running your own business at the time.
Yeah.
So what were you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm a joiner by trade.
Yeah.
So I was still working on site. Had a few lads working under me, and as I said, we just bought our first plot of land to build our own house. So, but I'd always been, from the age of 15, 16, I'd gone in the bookies, had a bet. I've always loved horses, really.
And so punting was always part of your life.
Yeah.
And so that was the big bet landed.
Yeah.
Was everything different from the next day?
I think it was. I mean, typical. I'll tell you a quick story about what my wife's like. So they flew us down. We were down in London, and they said, "Look, go and buy whatever you want. Go and buy whatever you want." So I went out, got a nice suit, because I was spending their money. Annalie comes back, and you won't believe it. There was a sale on at Dorothy Perkins. I said, "What? What? That's typical of my wife. She would just not be flash, not be a big spender. That's just what we're both like, really."
And so you tried to keep things steady?
Yes.
For a little while, anyway.
We kept things steady for a little while, and we bought a couple of horses early days with Jack Berry in those days.
Yeah.
Didn't have sort of great success then, and went from there, really. Just had horses on a small scale, nothing like today.
Okay, when was the tipping point? When did it become...
I built a couple of businesses. One was my property business, and another business that I sold for a reasonable amount of money. And from that's when I sort of started to spend big.
So you had a war chest?
Yes.
And you thought, I'm gonna go hard?
Yeah, I thought, because I'd bought horses really to gamble in the early days. So I would buy a horse maybe rated 85. And eventually he would be running off 60, 65, let's say. He might have needed time to get him fit, doing nothing wrong. But on the day, we would have a good punt, and we pulled a few of those off, with Dazine, Dazaki, Kingscroft, to name a few. I mean, some big punts. But it just became impossible because, I'm probably boring saying it, but everybody knows you just can't get a bet on now. It's impossible. You can't get a decent bet on if you want to.
Could you get a decent bet on then, or would you have to make sure that it was orchestrated in such a wily way that nobody'd know who was behind it?
I had 2 or 3 accounts at the time with various big bookies, so I got a little bit on with each. But once you've stung them a couple of times, that's it. It's all over, really. Nowadays, you just can't get a bet on. I mean, now if I want to bet, I have a really good friend in Ireland that puts a bet on for me with a firm called Fitzwilliam, which are like old style, really good VIP service, look after the guys in Ireland really well. And if I want a decent bet now, I'm down to that. I ask a friend of mine if he'll get the bet on for me with that business.
And did that business, well, they do now, I was going to say, did that business know whose money it actually is? Well,
like I say, they're old style. There's no secrets. They seem to take a decent bet, and they treat punters properly. From what I can see, you know, they've obviously registered in Ireland. I just find, you know, my friend finds them great to deal with. Great to deal with.
So you still like punting. Punting's still in you.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you still like pulling off a coup.
Yeah, I mean, it's different now because it is, I must say, it is easier to get on in the better races. So obviously Ashdown Lad running the Beecher, it's still difficult, but in the better races you can get on. If you're running a horse at Wolverhampton in 0 to 60, forget it, you've just no chance of getting on.
There's logic behind that though, isn't there? Because if you're running a horse in the Beecher Chase and you really fancy that horse, I as your layer have got I've got a pretty good chance.
Absolutely.
If you're running your 85 horse that I know nothing about in the 0 to 60, I've got no chance at all, so I'm not going to touch you with a barge pole.
Absolutely, but still, even in the Beecher, it's still, you know, you still struggle to get a good bet on, even in the Beecher.
And when you say a good bet, what sort of money would you be looking to win?
I guess if you wanted to get a bet on to win at least 100 grand, even in the Beecher, you would really struggle.
And is that what you need to win out of a bet to make it really worthwhile?
Well, you know, to buy a decent horse nowadays, you're looking at a couple of 100 grand, and then you've got your training fees. You're never going to make it pay. You're never going to make it pay. But what I've found is now, and I sort of changed my tack a few years ago because of not being able to get on, I've started buying better horses to run in better races, and hopefully the prize money. So Ashdown Lad, for instance, I think we bought him as a young horse, maybe for about 140,000, and he's now won the Beecher, which was around about 60,000 to the owners, I think. So that's probably 3 years training fees. So in that, you know, you're never going to get your money back for buying him, but if you can win a couple of decent races, you're going to cover your fees.
So you still apply a bit of business nous to proceedings. It's not just a question of, right, I've got this many million to spend, I'm going to work my way through it.
No. I try. I'm not really a seller because obviously you dream all your life of getting a nice horse. Now I'm sure we would get a large bid for Ashdown because obviously he's potentially a national horse now. Handicap's put him up to 145. So I would imagine out there's people that would bid, but I don't think there's a price for that horse because it's obviously a dream. It's a dream to own a horse like that.
Now, you made the point right at the beginning of this interview that not everyone seemed happy for you when you won with Ashdown Lad. What did you mean by that?
I don't want to be negative at all. I mean, but it's like I don't have social media because I think the way the world's gone, it's just not for me. I'm a bit of a dinosaur, I'm afraid. But my two children, obviously when we bought horses like Carlos Felix, when we bought Black Lion, and we spent a lot of money and they ran badly, social media nearly blows up. Laughing, you know, this is that. And I said, look, I'm not bothered. And Bradley said, yeah, it's really interesting though, Dad. He said, I think it was 3 comments after Ashdown Lad winning. He said there'd have probably been 3,000 if it had fell at the first. I said, yeah, but that's just life. That, I'm afraid, that's just the world that we live in.
And the famous example is you bought a horse called Interconnected for a lot of money.
Yeah.
Over 600 grand at the
sales. And that was really interesting because, again, I got berated for that, but I think JP was the underbidder. Nicky wanted him back. I think I went to 620, and I think the bid below me was 600. And we've had a bit of bad luck with him. He got injured. You pay your money, take your chance. But my big point on that was, I'm the idiot for bidding 620. So if JP had got him for 600, is he going to get the same treatment as me? I guess not. But that's just the way we are.
And why do you think that was? Why do you think there was that sort of reaction? It came off the back of buying
Black Lion, I think.
And well, we'll talk about him in a minute. So, Black Lion and horses to run in the Grand National.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Black Lion got injured before the National, as you know, when I first bought him. And we bought Don Poli to run in the National because we were desperate for runners. So we bought him at the sale 2 days before. And we had a heart set on going to the National with the family. So that sale was there, and I looked at Don Poli. Yeah, he was an old boy, but we bought him, and, you know, he won a couple of points for us. He ran in the Fox Hunters at Cheltenham, and we retired him, you know, because, he was a lovely old boy.
And you still got your money's worth from him in terms of the pleasure he's given you?
Don Poli, probably just about, because he's got a happy retirement now. A friend of mine in Lytham, Lucy, she has him and she's got him doing eventing and all that, and he's got a really, really happy life, which to me is, really important. Black Lion, I remember when we bought him, and I think we paid $300,000 for him, and we were laughed at with that. Well, he's been 6th in a national. He's been 14th in a national.
He was the best Brit in the national the first time, wasn't he?
Brit. He's won 2 fantastic races at Haydock last year for us, as you know, the Veterans and the Last Fling. The Last Fling probably by 30 lengths. You can't buy that, You couldn't put a price on that. The fun that old boy has given us, I just love him. He is the love of my life, Black Lion.
Is this the first horse that you've really developed that sort of connection with? The way you talk about him.
I guess so, and it's his age as well, and he just wants to do it for you. I just love him. He just never ever knows. I mean, he ran 2 weeks ago. We got him ready for the race at Haydock again, and the ground went against him a little bit. But if you watch the race, I mean, he went down on his sword. He went out, led, just got a little bit outspeeded, not outstayed because the ground wasn't quite soft enough. But he's done his best again, and the horse is just so happy. He just wants to be there. He wants to do it. I mean, I'll retire him tomorrow. Let's be straight on that. But Dan's ringing me from home. I mean, I think we've got a video somewhere of him leading all the young boys out, and he's just amazing. Amazing horse.
So he's rising 14, this horse, and it's easy to forget that back in his day with Nigel Twiston-Davies, he was winning an RSA chase at Cheltenham, and he held his form right up until last season. This is Black Lion on the gallops at Dan Skelton's. He was asked to lead a load of babies up the hurdles.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the young apprentice was riding him, and Dan sent me this video. So they've all
Toby Fry on Black Lion, isn't it?
So they've all set off together.
This is him in front.
Yeah, and Dan sends him the video. I said, "That's not the old boy, is it?" He said, "Darren." He said, look at him." He said, "He's just amazing. He's just gone. Nobody can keep up with him. This is at 13." So I said, "There's no way we can. There's just no way we can retire this horse. We just, he's still loving the game."
He got that much enthusiasm.
Yeah, amazing horse. Amazing horse.
Interconnected, you spent all the money on.
Yeah.
And he was going to go to Phil Kirby.
Yeah.
Who's trained a bunch of horses for you and still does.
Yeah, trained some flat horses for me, Phil, yeah.
Then you moved horses to Dan Skelton.
Yeah.
And trainers move horses all the time, but that, for whatever reason, seemed to go down particularly badly. How did you react to that?
Well, I got berated for that in the press and everything, but as you know, Phil and I are still friends. Phil still trains, as I say, most of my flat horses. I made a decision that I was going to have my jumpers with Dan, and that was my decision. Surely, if I'm the owner and I own the horses, I'm allowed to make the decision. Never fell out with Phil. Phil and Pippa are great. Phil has a great operation down there, does a great job, and as I said, he still trains flat horses for me. So, I don't know, in the press, it was like I'd murdered somebody. It was just unbelievable. You had your friend Mr. Osborne on, who had his opinions, which was great. I won't go into that much more. But
there was an exchange on this very programme that genuinely got your back up.
Yes.
Yeah. Where we were discussing it in the talking points and passed it to Jamie, and he talked about you shouldn't really have taken the horses away from Phil, and it upset you.
Well, I guess everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that was his opinion. So I don't really want to comment too much on that. I have my opinions on that.
But you moved and you chose the Skeltons. Why did you go to Dan?
Well, it's quite funny, really. In the early days, I used to love watching show jumping. So I'd followed Nick Skelton, obviously winning medals at the Olympics and such. Loved the way Dan was up and coming. There's no doubt he's going to be champion trainer, and the whole operation is just class. Dan's class. Harry's class, the dad's class, Bridget, everybody there. And they're just very, very straight talking. They don't stand any, we have our opinions, we chat about things, but they're the boss. Harry is, for me, probably one of the most intelligent jockeys riding. He's superb, and if he's not available, I have Bridget. And she's fantastic as well. So as an owner, and I think people maybe don't take this into consideration, when you've got a fantastic team of people there that are riding your horses at home every day, you go to the races, you go in the paddock, you're not worried about what jockey you've booked. It's Harry or it's Bridget. They ride them up fantastic. It makes Annalie and I so relaxed. They're just, everything about them is professional and really, really nice people. Just pure class. That's how I would describe the Scallons.
So, for you as you've had horses with how many different trainers?
In the early days, I don't know, 4 or 5 different trainers on the flat. I've sort of lost a bit of love for the flat, to be perfectly honest, and I just really, really love the jump game now. And
why is that? That's interesting, because I think that reflects quite a bit of opinion at large.
I think, is it because I'm a northern guy, a northern boy, grew up in the north? I think jump racing, even though the horses can be very expensive, when you go jump racing, it just always seems to be more down to earth to me. I would call it salt of the earth. You know, you go to Wetherby, but anywhere, even if you go to Cheltenham or Aintree. I mean, Harry was making some comments of how happy he is when he goes to Aintree, how the people are, and I just think jump racing is, it's only my opinion, but Annalie and I love the jump racing more now.
But it's kind of important because you're investing quite heavily in it, and if it makes you feel good, then that's something we ought to take notice of. There's something about that game that is encouraging you to spend, encouraging you to participate, encouraging you to want to be there, to take friends there, to introduce people to it.
Yeah, I think obviously it's like anything in life, whatever you buy, whatever sport you're into, if you're having success, if you have some success, it's easier to keep going, isn't it? And we struggled a bit early on. We had a lot of bad luck. As I said, we bought Black Lion. He got injured right before the National. That was really hard to take. I still believe he'd have won the National that year. And you need a bit of luck to keep going, because you know it's not an endless. I haven't got endless pockets. You know, you do want a bit of luck. You've got to enjoy your day out. That's why I like the beach. Or having my family there, my son Bradley and my daughter Natalie. I mean, I nearly brings me to tears now. It's just an amazing day, and to have, you know, Dan planned the beacher after the Scottish National last year. I mean, I've listened to Dave Nevison on your show, I think, as well, and he calls him the best target trainer in the country. And in my opinion, he absolutely is. You know, he'll pick a race, we'll discuss it, and we'll work back from there. I mean, it's when you think about that, you know, you think about that in real terms. Scottish National last year, we finished 5th. And I speak to Dan the next day, I said, right, we're aiming for the beacher next year. It's pretty amazing. You know, you got to really think about that. The time between, the planning, Harry's planning the race, the horse likes a bit of space, how he's rode, just everything. I mean, to get that to happen, it wants some doing.
And does that inspire you then to say, right, I want to go out and buy a few more?
Absolutely. I mean, Dan and I laugh because I have an opinion about point-to-points in Ireland, and I say, we're buying a horse that's running around a muddy field. It's just my comment on it, and Dan and I laugh about it. And most point-to-point winners in Ireland, they're 450 grand now. They're worth that day. After they win that point and you buy that horse, they're worth it that day. They're never worth that money again. They can't all be Gold Cup winners, can they? They can't. So I've changed tack a little bit on that now, and we buy younger horses, maybe 3-year-olds in Ireland before they've even run in the point that Dan really likes. We've bought a horse to replace Black Lion, one of the last Cave Taras, that's a full brother to Katira. That won about 10 lengths the other day. So that'll run next year. So because you're talking figures, and I'm not prying unduly, but so what would a 3-year-old like that typically cost you? To get something like that, you'd be looking at around about 100,000. I know for the everyday person that's a hell of a lot of money. I understand that. You know, I'm a builder. Let's just be dead straight. That's where I've come from. Still a lot of money, but I'd rather take, and as I said, I've changed tack with Dan, we'd rather take a chance on 2 or 3 like that rather than buying one that's won a point at 450 grand.
Okay.
It's all opinions, I might be wrong, but let's see how they turn out.
So these are the difference, the fundamental difference obviously is that these 3 are completely untried, and the horse that's making 450 has already been sifted through the system by all these top point-to-point people to be, you know, worth a little bit more, to have a greater statistical chance of making that elite 4 or 5% of horses. Yeah,
again, that's opinions again, because obviously Dan is the one that really knows his stuff, and they've had to be gotten ready for that, haven't they? They've had to be gotten ready to win that horse race as a 4-year-old. Is that a good thing? I don't know. You know, they've had to have the gun a little bit to the head to go and win that point. So in a way, I quite like the way we'll take our time a little bit with them.
See, this for me is quite an interesting journey for you, because if I didn't know you, you'd think, well, here's a guy who just spends a lot of money, because that's the way you've been portrayed,
Yeah.
rightly or wrongly, but I suspect wrongly, because it strikes me that you've put a lot more thought into how you're going to approach this as each step of the journey has taken place.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to sound arrogant in any way, but I've obviously built quite a few different types of businesses and sold those. I like to think that when I get into something, I think about it and think of slight different angles and different ways you can make things work.
But is part of that, is part of being able to make money from a standing start, taking a few risks, playing a few shots?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, inherently in me, I am a gambler. I am a gambler by nature. In business, I'm a gambler. Obviously, I've been a punter and I'm still a punter. The way I live my life is like that. Wouldn't be for everybody. You know, I still take reasonably big risks now.
To that end, I mean, are you someone who we could read tomorrow, Darren Yates loses the lot,
Never.
he's out of the game?
No.
Or have you managed to insure yourself against that?
I think what you do when you've started from nothing, I mean, my dad, God love him, is obviously not with us anymore. And one of the things, my big regrets, he's never been with me when I've had a winner. And my mum's still alive, so I've come from nothing. And when you get a chance, you know, and you work your way up, you absolutely, in my opinion, you know, my kids are sound now, they're sorted, they both got a lovely house, they both got good jobs, they're fine. Anneli and I are reasonably secure. I'm sure we could have quite a lot more money in the bank if I hadn't spent as much money on horses, or if I wasn't still gambling on certain businesses. But yeah, we're reasonably secure now, yeah.
And as someone who's in the building business and understands that very well,
yeah,
how do you see the next 2 or 3 years playing out? Not just for your horses, but for you personally, for all of us.
I think obviously the whole world's had a bad time, haven't they, with COVID. I don't know where we're going to end up, to be perfectly honest. I don't know where racing's going to end up. It's difficult for me to comment on that, because I've been very lucky in life. I've got to where I've got to. Not just lucky, I've worked bloody hard for everything I've got, really hard. So I just don't think it's going to be easy for the next 2 or 3 years with the state the country's in at the moment, personally.
Were you somebody who, when you were in your early days as a joiner, 15, 16, 17, were you someone who imagined life beyond that? Imagined life in a different sphere? Imagined anything like this, or not?
I guess I'm a little bit like my dad that way. I know my dad always used to tell me he was a plasterer and he worked for the council, and the day he came out of his time, 17, he went self-employed and his wage doubled. I mean, I guess I was the same. I finished serving my time at 18 as a joiner, and I went self-employed the same day and tried to build a business from there. It's just what I've always been like.
So what do you have to have at 18 when you're self-employed to do better than the average self-employed joiner? What's your selling point?
I guess
is it force of personality?
I guess we'll put it in Spanish. You need grande cojones. That's what you need.
You can say big balls on this channel.
Okay, thanks, Nick. You need, and that's what a lot of people say about me. They say you've got really, really big balls, and it comes from the gamble. It comes from the personality I've got. I'm prepared to have a go. I'm prepared to have a go. Always have been.
And was that when you were a kid? I say a kid. When you were a little older than that, and you were trying to establish yourself. Were you somebody with the chat? Could you convince somebody to give you business rather than the next guy down the street?
I think the one thing I would say, and I would say to any young person, and I still believe it to this day, and my dad is from the building trade world. Working in the building trade, it's the best grounding I think anybody could have. They're down to earth, that type of person, the salt of the earth. I think it comes from that with me, really, being involved in the building trade from an early age. I think that's what's given me the grounding to go on and do other things, if I'm being really honest.
And one of those things is horse racing. How much of your life now is taken up with thinking about, obsessing about, worrying about horses that are going to run for you?
I wouldn't say I worry, and I wouldn't say I particularly obsess. I'm trying to build a really good team of jumpers with Dan and Harry, which we're well on our way to doing. And I'm quite relaxed about it now. I guess, would I say relief? It's nice to win a big one. It's nice, obviously the Beach is a really, really big race, and we'd never take that for granted.
But does it dominate? Does it dominate your every waking thought racing?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't dominate my every waking thought. No.
So there's still a life beyond it for you. There's still context there. There's still a day job.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you're in it, and you're in it for the long haul.
I'm absolutely in it for the long haul. Yeah.
Darren, for the moment, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Subscribe to Racing TV's YouTube channel now to watch more great races like this.